I'm here with Zach at Arizona Worm Farm.
And I want to give you a tour of our food forest. We have found over the 4 or 5 years that we've grown this food forest that we are the most successful if we create diversity. I've let this go. This is natural growth. These trees have never been trimmed, and there's nothing better than a fresh peach right off the tree.
I'm Angela from Growing in the Garden. This garden is in Phoenix, Arizona. I want to help you succeed, even if you're gardening in tough conditions. How long ago did you start this food forest?
Right, so when we bought this property, it was a cotton field. And the way you farm cotton in Arizona is you drench the soil with an herbicide, and then you plant a genetically modified cotton start in it. That's the only thing that'll grow. So for 6 months, we couldn't even get weeds to grow. We focused on our garden areas first, but we came out here, designed it in 2018, and in 2019, we put down 6 inches of compost and 12 inches of mulch. We watered it for a year and didn't plant anything. So we did our first planting of actual trees here, 2020 and 2021. What you're gonna see here is plants that are between 2 and 4 years old, all of which are fruiting heavily now. We designed this with the help of a permaculture expert, and we gave her the charge to make sure something was giving fruit every day of the year. In the springtime, these mulberries will produce hundreds of pounds of the most delicious fruit. Sometimes it's Indian jujubes or goji berries that I find not all that nice.
I like goji berries.
So goji berries,
they taste pretty good.
It's just, yeah. These guys have continued to fruit almost all year long. The couple of trees in this area were planted in the spring of 2022. So this is going into what will be its 4th year. This plum tree produced 75 or 80 pounds of the most delicious plums I've ever had. The stone fruits and the plums, the apricots, March, April. So those are apricots. Asparagus, because we're trying to grow at all 3 levels. So we're trying to grow stuff at the ground level. You can see back there are bush beans. The idea being to keep the ground covered and either with mulch or with something green and growing. The lower levels, things that need protection, and then the canopy trees, which for us is going to be mostly mulberries and natives. All the natives in this area are what we call volunteers. When we put that mulch down, stuff grew. And so what we did for the first year was remove plants as opposed to plant plants. So we left in the outer mesquites and palm trees and acacias. Those are all things that volunteered from the mulch. And you can see now mesquite trees are a good 30, 40 feet tall just from the mulch.
So let's talk a little bit more about growing something at every level. What are some more of the first level plants that you like to grow?
Beans and peas, sweet potatoes, watermelons and cantaloupes, vining squash, Malabar spinach. It outcompetes the weeds. It keeps the ground naturally cooler. It's about creating microclimates. It's about growing things that will help us keep this area cooler in the summertime and warmer in the wintertime. Your best memory of the best forest that you were ever in, there's stuff growing everywhere. And we're trying to emulate that. We want the ground to be covered with things that help protect the ground and help grow microbes. We want that fruit layer that gives us that abundant, the happy stuff that you just can't wait to go pick. And then we want the top layer that helps protect everything. So that when we walk in here in the summertime, the ambient temperature could be 110 degrees. In here it'll be 85 or 90 degrees. It's still hot, but it's much, much more comfortable than it is out in the sun. This has become our tropical area. Guavas and sapote, a bunch of tropical fruits that need a little bit more protection. We have passion fruit vines, and then behind you we have a banana grove, and those do fine here all year round because they're protected by these trees. They don't freeze hard in the winter, they don't burn in the summertime, and we'll get 2 or 3 or 4 stalks of bananas every year. We'll let our compost turner go by. So the only thing I'll warn you is it'll flick stuff. And you'll be able to feel that cloud. Ground landscape waste, mulch, and then horse manure, and then food waste.
So you still love what you do?
Yeah.
You're still excited about it? That's awesome.
I can't wait to get down here every day. The other thing that we're trying to accomplish with the mulch and with this microclimate that we're trying to create is that lone tree off by itself in crushed granite everything around it is trying to cook it. And here we're trying to get everything around it to cool it. We have found over the 4 or 5 years that we've grown this food forest that we are the most successful if we create diversity. So we try not to plant like trees next to other like trees. If a particular tree gets a disease, you don't want it to wipe out all of the similar trees. So if you put a stone fruit next to a fig tree, next to a pomegranate, next to a nut fruit, they don't share common diseases and common pests. If something happens to a particular tree, it doesn't spread to the other trees. The groupings of stone fruit or the groupings of citrus trees, they just don't work quite as well as spreading that diversity of tree. So we hired a permaculturist to help us design this food forest, and she created guilds, a collection of trees that support each other, that help feed each other, and are diverse enough so that we don't spread disease from tree to tree. Guild is a permaculture term for a collection of trees and watering approaches that work nicely together. The collection within an area where you have trees that not only are compatible, but actually help each other grow. Infrastructure trees, the canopy things that protect the things that need protecting, the ground covers that protect the soil and encourage the other growth. A fancy word for a well-designed neighborhood. This is a variegated pink lemon, which is just the coolest tree in the world. We planted this as a 5-gallon tree. There's nothing in here that was put in larger than a 5-gallon container, and most of them are 1 gallon. Easier to plant, less expensive, way less stress on the trees, way less frustrating if one dies. I have found that you're not really waiting that much longer. By planting it smaller, I ultimately get roots that grow better. I get better, healthier growth and a more acclimated growth. So I don't get transplant shock in little trees. And I find that after 3 or 4 or 5 years, I'm in exactly the same spot as I would have been had I spent 10 times as much and gotten a much larger one. Yeah. And I do that with way less risk. Mulberry that you're looking at behind you was planted as a bare root tree. It was probably a $15 plant initially, and now 3 years later it produces 70 or 80 pounds of mulberries. Apple tree, a little bit slower growing. This is a Dorset Golden, produces a beautiful small fruit early season. The time that it needs to mature coincides with when it's the hottest here. This is protected by infrastructure trees. We pick them young and a little bit tart. Variety selection matters a lot. You definitely want to get low chill hour fruits. So I grew up in Phoenix, and in Phoenix, the border between your yard and the next yard was very frequently oleanders. Oleanders provided that nice, thick, all year round, protected your view from your neighbor, but it's really kind of an awful plant. And I decided when we put in a barrier here, we were going to put in mulberries. So these are dwarf mulberries called everbearing. I've let this go. This is natural growth. These trees have never been trimmed. 3 years in the ground, and they'll get covered with fruit that my grandkids can reach.
Can you tell me about how you water this? Do you have flood irrigation here?
We've created berms. And the design of the berms is to allow water to flow appropriately. So we flood this. And again, we're lucky we can flood it about once a month in the wintertime, about twice a month in the summertime. It's designed so that trees that need more water get more water, and trees that need less get less. The tropicals and the bananas are over where the water comes in. They get the most water. The sugar cane, there's a sort of a flow of water that heads to these more native trees. Will get less water further away from the water source.
Thinking about your tree placement then, the sunlight, the flood irrigation, the watering.
If you make a mistake with a tree, it's really hard to correct. If you decide, 3 years from now, I don't want that tree there, I'd really rather have it over here, there's just no way to do that. And so having somebody actually map it out for us, we have a blueprint of this whole area of what would go in each of the guilds, what kinds of trees to let get big, and what things to not allow, are all important in the planning of what you're trying to accomplish. Having said that, in anybody's backyard, they should plant a tree now. Start with the trees that you want to get really big, and then start adding other things. But in Arizona, citrus are easy, pomegranates are easy, fig trees are easy, mulberry are easy. Start with trees that are going to be successful. We might shade something for the first 6 months or so that it was up, but that's the extent of the special care that you get. So things that are really, really hard, that require specialized soil and lots of different amendments, we don't do that. You can. You absolutely can.
It just depends on what your goals are. If your goals are, like you said, to eat something every day of every year, you're having a wider variety. But if you really do want to focus in and provide the care that one particular tree needs, you can do it.
We're doing everything that we can naturally. We don't poison anything on the farm except ants. Ants are the only thing that we just can't live with ants. But everything else we try and deal with naturally.
Well, Zach, I have loved getting a closer look at your food forest. Thank you so much for the tour.
My pleasure. Welcome anytime.
Thanks.